My name is Stuart Rosenblatt, and I'd like to thank you all for listening. I am a political activist in the Washington, D.C. area, heavily involved with legislation in the Congress and state governments, working with groups of colleagues to address a crucial problem facing the nation, namely the lack of infrastructure development and manufacturing, which was laid bare for the whole country to see this summer when the hurricanes hit in Florida, Texas, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere. And lo and behold, we not only have little in the way of infrastructure, but people unnecessarily lost their lives and cities and states were devastated. There are no bills currently extant in the United States Congress to address this from either party. There are some well-intended bills with no funding. The administration has no bill as of the latest reading last week, but there is a solution. The country has to go back to the policy of national banking, which built this nation from its inception all the way through the end of the 1950s. And the solution lies in a new draft bill, which my friends and I have been circulating, for a national infrastructure bank. I want to give you the history behind this and then how this policy will be implemented. Historically, the idea of national banking goes all the way back to the founding fathers. The first Bank of the United States was created by Alexander Hamilton, and it was used to build all of the early internal improvements, roads, canals, dams, bridges, none of which had previously existed. The second Bank of the United States was reached its high point under John Quincy Adams and the bank president Biddle, and they were directly involved in helping to fund all of the railroads and all of the canals that built the country from the East Coast all the way through what was called the Ohio Country or the Western Reserve, which began to really develop the nation. That bank was killed by one of the worst presidents we ever had, Andrew Jackson, but the policy of national banking and a national bank was revived under President Abraham Lincoln, a big advocate. In the National Banking Acts of 1863 and 1864, we created the first national banking system modeled on the principles of Alexander Hamilton. The government created a national bank network. The banks bought debt and parked it in the Treasury. The government then issued the famous greenback, and it was the greenbacks acting as credit that were deployed to build the steel industry, iron industry, mining industry, and eventually all the industries that both won the Civil War and directly built the transcontinental railroads that in 1869 connected the East Coast and the West Coast and made us one nation. That policy went on for a number of decades and then flagged. It was revived by Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. President Roosevelt had a bill like Hamilton's for a national bank, could not get it through. The Congress grabbed the Reconstruction Finance Corporation of Herbert Hoover and turned it into a national bank. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation was used to build much of the New Deal, including the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which rescued many people who had lost their homes, the Commodity Credit Corporation, which saved farms, and it built entirely the Rural Electric Administration, which brought electric power to much of the country which never had it. It also created the Fannie Mae, the Federal National Mortgage Agency. It created the Ex-Im Bank, etc. In World War II, however, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was a massive contributor to the industrial expansion that allowed the material might of the country to be brought forward to win World War II. The synthetic rubber industry was built from scratch by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, as was the airplane industry, as was the aluminum industry, and on and on. And most emphatically, the machine tools that built all of the other industries were built by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. It was actually called the fourth branch of government. It was known as the biggest bank in the world. It unfortunately lapsed in the 1950s, and the country gradually went downhill after that. We are now in a mess. We have to revive this policy. There is now circulating a new bill for a national bank, which I can make available to people, and we'll show you how to get it after this broadcast. This bank will build all of the infrastructure that the country urgently needs in tandem with the federal government. It will revive manufacturing. It will revive, most importantly, productivity. How will this bank be financed? There are currently $14 trillion in outstanding U.S. treasuries. Those treasuries can be traded by the holders of those treasuries who are currently making a meager 0 to 2% interest for bonds or preferred stock in the national bank, which will pay a federally insured guaranteed 4 to 5%. That is no new debt, no new government appropriations. This will then be opened up to investment by the public. The bank will issue bonds or stock. The public can invest pension funds, banks, corporations, cities, states, and so we will have no problem raising $2 to $5 trillion. The bank will pay a federally insured 4 to 5%. How will that be paid? We will pay the interest by a dedicated tax. And the best way is an increased gas tax, which everybody has been calling for, from the building trades to many Republicans and Democrats in Congress. The National Bank will build all of the necessary infrastructure that we've neglected in concert with the government. It will also build big projects. High-speed railroads, a network of at least 25,000 miles, new power plants, and a new water system. So the country will not have to go through what went on in Flint, Michigan, and many other cities over the last number of years. In addition, the bank will pay Davis-Bacon wages, meaning prevailing wage, high wages, high benefits, and will rapidly increase the productivity of the country. Now, finally, let me say that this bank will address this crisis that the country has been facing. So the question we always get is, who's opposed to this national bank? Well, that answer is very simple. Wall Street, the biggest Wall Street banks. The JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America crowd have a racket going on. And the racket is that they get 0% interest money from the government. That money is used for two things. Number one, to invest in more derivatives, securities of the most questionable sort that collapsed in 2008. These big banks are only holding nearly $250 trillion worth on their books. Secondly, is that they are loaning out the cheap money to corporations and others to buy, and themselves to buy back their own stock. You want to know why the stock market is skyrocketing? Ask the Wall Street banks. The corporate debt level in this country, courtesy of this cheap credit, which is virtually all consumed in stock buybacks, is now $14 trillion, could burst at any point, and is being done courtesy of the 0%. So that's where our opposition is. Let me say this. There is no reason why this nation can't launch a gigantic infrastructure manufacturing driver program. A recent study out of Ohio State University said that one of the main causes of the opioid epidemic is lack of good jobs, lack of production, a sense of no future, cultural despair. And they say that it has been the collapse of good jobs and production that has directly fed the opioid, heroin, fentanyl, and other epidemics. This is the time we can address this crisis with a durable solution. There is a draft bill circulating, which is 4 pages, modeled on Hamilton's original bank. In addition, a dozen state legislatures have introduced resolutions this year in support of that national bank. The lower house in Illinois passed one of those resolutions, and many more are pending. In addition, city councils are now introducing similar resolutions. So I would say to you, if you would like to get involved in this effort, please contact myself or my colleagues. The phone number and email will be available on the screen, and I would urge you to join this effort. Again, this is Stuart Rosenblatt thanking you for your time and urging you to contact your members of Congress to get this legislation introduced now, and let's go back to the policies that built this country and go back to a durable Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy solution. There is a solution to this crisis. Thank you.